Drowning in debt, Zaria Munro answers a mysterious job ad. Hours later, she's sitting across from Cassian Blake, a cold billionaire who offers her a shocking deal: marriage, in name only. But when business and hearts collide, lines blur dangerously. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Zaria Munro stared at the eviction notice on her apartment door. Just what she needed after being laid off from her job at the bookstore last week. At 25, she was drowning in student loans with no way to pay them off, let alone the 3 months of back rent she owed. Grandma would say something about God closing doors and opening windows, she muttered, unlocking her door and stepping into the cramped one-bedroom apartment in Queens. She tossed her purse onto the worn sofa and collapsed beside it. 5 job applications today, and not one promising lead. Her dream of opening her own children's bookstore seemed farther away than ever. Her phone rang. It was her grandmother, Pearl. "How are you holding up, baby?" Pearl's voice was warm and comforting. "I'm fine, Grandma," Zaria lied, not wanting to worry the woman who had raised her after her mother died when Zaria was just 10. "Still job hunting. You'll find something. You're smart, educated. God has a plan." "I hope his plan includes paying my rent," Zaria said with a sigh. After they hung up, Zaria opened her laptop to search for more jobs. That's when she saw it, an ad for an in-house caretaker position. No job description, no company name, just a phone number and a salary that made her blink twice. "This has to be fake," she said, staring at the 6-figure number on the screen. But desperate times called for desperate measures. She dialed the number. To her surprise, a crisp, professional voice answered. "Blake Estate, how may I direct your call?" 24 hours later, Zaria found herself in the back of a sleek black car, being driven through the gates of an enormous mansion in Westchester County. The ivy-covered stone building looked like something out of a movie, cold, elegant, and intimidating. A thin, stern-faced man in a suit greeted her at the door. "Ms. Munro, I'm Jenkins, the estate manager. Please follow me." He led her through marble hallways, adorned with artwork that probably cost more than her entire life. The staff they passed kept their eyes down, moving silently like ghosts. "The position is unique," Jenkins said as they entered a wood-paneled office. "Before we proceed, you'll need to sign this." He slid a thick document across the desk. "An NDA. The job is unconventional. You'll live on site. You'll be compensated weekly. But if you breach confidentiality, the contract terminates, and so does your payout." Zaria hesitated, pen hovering over the paper. "Can I at least know what the job is before I sign?" "Mr. Blake will explain personally, this evening." Desperation won out. She signed. Jenkins showed her to a guest suite larger than her entire apartment. "Dinner is at 7. Mr. Blake will join you." Left alone, Zaria took a hot shower in a bathroom bigger than her kitchen, then changed into the nicest outfit she'd brought, a simple black dress. At 7, Jenkins escorted her to a formal dining room where a table set for 2 awaited. She sat alone for 15 minutes before the door opened. Cassian Blake was nothing like she'd expected, tall and lean, with sharp features and penetrating grey eyes. His dark hair was slightly too long, as if he'd forgotten to cut it. He wore an expensive suit that fit him perfectly, but his face looked tired, guarded. "Ms. Munro." He didn't offer his hand. "I apologize for the mystery." "Mr. Blake." Zaria stood, unsure of the protocol. "I'm still not clear on what position I'm interviewing for." "You're not interviewing anymore, you're hired." He took his seat at the head of the table. "Please, sit." Servers appeared with food Zaria couldn't name, then disappeared just as quickly. "I assume you've heard of me," Cassian said. Zaria shook her head. "Should I have?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Surprise. Most people have." "I don't follow business news much," she admitted. "I'm more of a fiction reader. Fiction is easier, cleaner." He took a sip of water. "Reality tends to be messier, like mysteriously hiring someone without telling them what the job is." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Yes, like that." Zaria decided to be direct. "Mr. Blake, I need to know what I'm being hired for." He studied her for a long moment. "You'll be expected to attend dinners, accompany me to public events, appear emotionally accessible." Zaria blinked. "What exactly did I get hired for?" A beat. "To be my wife. On paper." Zaria nearly choked on her water. "Excuse me, it's a business arrangement," he continued, unmoved by her shock. 1 year. You'll have your own suite here. Complete autonomy when not required for appearances. Weekly payments, plus a final sum upon completion of the contract that will clear all your debts." "How do you know about my debts?" I had you thoroughly vetted. Your student loans amount to $87,430. Your credit card debt is $6,291. You've been dreaming of opening a children's bookstore since you were 19. Zaria felt violated and intrigued at the same time. Why me? You have no significant attachments, no scandals. You're educated, articulate, and... He paused. You look nothing like her. Her? My late fiancée. The words hung in the air between them. I'm not interested in being anyone's replacement, Zaria said firmly. That's precisely why you're perfect. You're not a replacement. You're a solution to a business problem. Cassian's voice was cold, calculated. The board of my company is trying to force me out. They believe I'm unstable after Lillian's death. If I appear settled with a wife, certain clauses in my inheritance activate that give me controlling interest. So you want to trick them with a fake marriage? It would be a legal marriage, just not a real one. Zaria stood up, angry now. This is insane. I'm not going to marry a stranger for money. Aren't you? Cassian's eyes were challenging. Your eviction notice gives you 30 days. Your student loan payment is past due. Your grandmother's medical bills... Leave my grandmother out of this, Zaria snapped. My point is that you need money. I need a wife. It's a simple transaction. Marriage isn't a transaction. Everything is a transaction, Ms. Monroe. He pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. The contract stipulates no romantic involvement, no physical contact beyond what's necessary for appearances. After 1 year, we divorce quietly, and you walk away with enough money to open your bookstore and never worry about bills again. Zaria wanted to storm out, to tell this cold, calculating man exactly what she thought of his proposal, but the numbers in the contract made her pause. It was enough to pay off everything and fund her dream, to help her grandmother, to finally be free. I need time to think, she said. You have until tomorrow morning. Cassian stood. Jenkins will show you back to your room. After a sleepless night, Zaria called her grandmother. I've been offered a job as a live-in assistant to a businessman in Westchester, she said, not mentioning the marriage part. The pay is amazing, Grandma. Sounds too good to be true, Pearl said skeptically. What's the catch? No catch, just unusual hours and responsibilities. Her grandmother didn't sound convinced. Just remember what I always told you. When something seems too good to be true, it usually is. After hanging up, Zaria paced the guest room. Was she really considering this? Marrying a stranger, a cold, damaged billionaire for money. At 9, there was a knock at her door. Jenkins stood there with Cassian. Your decision? Cassian asked, without preamble. Zaria took a deep breath. If I do this, I have conditions. I want everything in writing. I want guarantees about the money. And I want to be able to visit my grandmother whenever I want. Done, Cassian said without hesitation. Anything else? Yes. I won't be treated like an employee in public. If we're supposed to be married, you'll treat me with respect. Something that might have been admiration flickered in his eyes. Of course. Then I'll do it. 3 days later, Zaria found herself in a private room at City Hall, saying, I do, to a man she barely knew. The ceremony was quick, clinical. No flowers, no music, just a judge, Jenkins as witness, and Cassian's lawyer hovering nearby. Cassian slid a ring onto her finger, a stunning diamond that must have cost a fortune but felt cold and heavy. The press release goes out tomorrow, the lawyer said as they signed the marriage certificate. We've prepared a story about a whirlwind romance. Zaria needs a new wardrobe, Cassian said, not looking up from the papers. And training on the company background, my schedule, how to handle the press. I'm right here, Zaria said sharply. Don't talk about me like I'm not in the room. Cassian looked at her, surprised. My apologies. The lawyer and Jenkins exchanged glances. That night, Zaria sat alone in her new suite at the Blake mansion, her home for the next year. She stared at the ring on her finger, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. Her phone rang. It was her grandmother. How's the new job, baby? Zaria hesitated. It's not what I expected. You sound strange. Is everything okay? Yes, it's just... Zaria couldn't bring herself to tell the truth. It's a big adjustment. Well, you just remember who you are. You're Pearl Monroe's granddaughter. You don't let anyone change you or push you around. I won't, Grandma. After they hung up, Zaria wandered to the window. The estate grounds stretched into darkness, beautiful but isolated. Like the man she'd just married, her phone pinged with a text message from an unknown number. Breakfast at 7. We need to prepare for our first public appearance tomorrow night. C. No, please. No, thank you. Just commands. Zarya typed back, I'll be there, but you might try saying please next time. She waited, wondering if he'd respond. A minute later, her phone pinged again. Please. See. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next morning, Zarya entered the dining room to find Cassian already there, reading something on a tablet. He stood when she entered, a surprisingly old-fashioned gesture. Good morning, he said. Morning, she replied, taking the seat a server pulled out for her. I apologize for my abruptness yesterday. This situation is unusual for me too. Zarya studied him. In the morning light, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. This wasn't easy for him either. Apology accepted. So what's happening tonight? A charity gala. The first time you'll be introduced as Mrs. Blake. Zarya nearly choked on her orange juice. Mrs. Blake? It's just a name, Cassian said, not looking up from his tablet. A role you're playing. Right. Zarya put down her fork. And what's my motivation for this role? How did we meet? Fall in love? People will ask. The story is that we met at a bookstore. You recommended a book that changed my perspective. We had coffee. Things progressed naturally. That's actually not terrible, Zarya admitted. I'm not completely devoid of imagination. There was that almost smile again. And what about your background? Your company? If I'm your wife, I should know these things. Cassian put down his tablet. Blake Technologies specializes in security software. I founded it 10 years ago. Current value is approximately 4.3 billion. Zarya's eyes widened. Billion with a B? Yes. He said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. 3 years ago, my fiancée Lillian died in a boating accident. The press suggested I was involved, though I was cleared of any wrongdoing. After that, I withdrew from public life. I'm sorry about your fiancée, Zarya said softly. Cassian's face closed off. It's in the past. But Zarya could see it wasn't. The pain was right there, just beneath the surface. The gala tonight is important, he continued. Harold Winters will be there. Who's that? My godfather, head of the board, the man trying to take my company. Cassian's voice hardened. He was like a father to me once. Now he's my biggest threat. Why is he trying to take your company? He claims I'm unstable, unfit to lead. Cassian's jaw tightened. After Lillian died, I had a difficult time, made some public mistakes. Harold used that to convince the board I needed guidance. Now marriage changes that how? There's a clause in my father's will. If I'm settled, married by my 33rd birthday, I gain controlling interest in the family trust. Harold knows this. He's been working to make sure it doesn't happen. When's your birthday? 3 months from now. Zarya absorbed this. So we stay married for 3 months, you get your company back, and then what? The contract says 1 year. To avoid suspicion, she nodded slowly. And tonight we convince everyone we're madly in love. Not madly, that would be suspicious. We're content, comfortable. I don't think you could act madly anything if your life depended on it, Zarya muttered. To her surprise, Cassian actually chuckled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost handsome. You might be right about that, Mrs. Blake. The way he said, Mrs. Blake, sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. That evening, a team arrived to prepare Zarya for the gala. Hair, makeup, a designer gown that fit perfectly. By the time they finished, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. Cassian was waiting at the bottom of the grand staircase. He looked up as she descended, and for a moment, his carefully controlled expression slipped. Something like appreciation flickered in his eyes. You look, he began, then seemed to catch himself. Appropriate. Zarya bit back a smile. You clean up pretty well yourself, Mr. Blake. In the car, Cassian briefed her on who would be at the gala. Names and companies blurred together. Just be yourself, he said finally, with some editing. Meaning, don't tell anyone this is a business arrangement, obviously, and perhaps avoid mentioning your financial situation. So be myself, but not. Everyone edits themselves in public, Zarya. It was the first time he'd used her first name, especially in these circles. The gala was held at a historic mansion even larger than Cassian's. As their car pulled up, photographers swarmed. Ready? Cassian asked, his hand on the door. Zarya took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. He surprised her by taking her hand. His touch was warm, firm. Just follow my lead. As they stepped out, cameras flashed. Cassian placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd with practiced ease. Mr. Blake, is this your new wife? A reporter called out. Cassian nodded, his face a mask of calm. Yes. May I introduce Zarya Blake? The name sounded strange to her ears. Reporters shouted questions. When did you meet? Was it a whirlwind romance? Does this mean you're back in the public eye? Cassian answered smoothly, sticking to their story. His hand never left her back, a constant, steadying presence. Inside, the ballroom was filled with New York's elite. Conversations paused as they entered, heads turning, whispers starting. Smile, Cassian murmured. They're all wondering how I managed to find someone like you. Someone like me. Beautiful. Young. Very much not like the women I usually associated with. Before Zarya could process the compliment, an older man approached. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair and cold blue eyes. Cassian, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. What a surprise. Harold. Cassian's voice cooled noticeably. I'd like you to meet my wife, Zarya. Harold Winters took Zarya's hand, studying her with calculating eyes. Well, this is unexpected. I wasn't aware you were even dating anyone. Some things are better kept private, Cassian replied. Indeed. Harold's gaze was penetrating. And how did you two meet, Mrs. Blake? Zarya smiled, remembering their cover story. At a bookstore, I recommended The Great Gatsby. Cassian said it changed his perspective. Did he? Harold looked amused. Cassian has always been full of surprises. The way he said it made it clear he didn't believe them. How's Rebecca? Cassian asked, changing the subject. My daughter is well. She asks about you. Send her my regards. The tension between the two men was palpable. Harold turned back to Zarya. I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into, Mrs. Blake. Cassian's world can be challenging. I'm not afraid of challenges, Zarya replied smoothly. Harold smiled thinly. We'll see. As he walked away, Zarya felt Cassian's grip on her waist tighten. He doesn't believe us, she whispered. No, Cassian agreed. But he will. Throughout the evening, Zarya was introduced to dozens of people, board members, business associates, socialites. She smiled, made small talk, played the role of the adoring new wife. Cassian remained by her side, occasionally touching her arm or back in a way that seemed both calculated and natural. When the orchestra began playing, Cassian led her to the dance floor. I should warn you, Zarya said as he took her in his arms. I'm not much of a dancer. Just follow my lead, he said again, guiding her into a simple waltz. As they moved across the floor, Zarya was acutely aware of his hand on her waist, the slight scent of his cologne, the way his eyes never left hers. You're doing well, he said quietly. They're watching us. All of them? Harold especially. He's trying to figure out if this is real. Zarya glanced over Cassian's shoulder. Sure enough, Harold was observing them with narrowed eyes. Then we should give him something to see, she said. Before she could overthink it, Zarya moved closer, resting her head against Cassian's shoulder. She felt him stiffen momentarily, then relax, his arm tightening around her waist. They danced in silence, bodies close, moving as one. For a moment, Zarya almost forgot this was all pretend. Later, as they drove home, Cassian was quiet. Did I do something wrong? Zarya finally asked. No, he said, staring out the window. You were perfect. Too perfect. What does that mean? He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. It means this might be more complicated than I anticipated. Back at the mansion, they walked in silence to the top of the stairs, where their separate suites lay in opposite directions. Good night, Mrs. Blake, Cassian said formally. Good night, Mr. Blake, Zarya replied with equal formality. As she turned to go, he spoke again. Zarya. She looked back at him. Thank you. For tonight. It wasn't much, but coming from him, it felt significant. In her room, Zarya carefully removed the borrowed jewels and designer gown. As she changed into her own pajamas, simple cotton things that felt like her real life, she caught sight of the diamond ring still on her finger. Mrs. Blake. For the next year, that was who she would be. A role in someone else's play, a solution to someone else's problem. She just hadn't expected to feel so confused after just one night. Cassian Blake was cold, damaged, and using her for his own purposes. She was using him, too, for the money. It was a business arrangement, nothing more. So why couldn't she stop thinking about the way it felt to dance in his arms? The morning after the gala, Zarya woke to find a stack of newspapers outside her door. Each one featured photos of her and Cassian from the previous night. Tech recluse returns with mystery wife, read one headline. Cassian Blake's surprise marriage, declared another. In most of the photos, they looked like any other couple, his hand on her back, her head on his shoulder as they danced. If she didn't know better, Zarya might have believed they were in love. At breakfast, Cassian was already reviewing documents when she arrived. He pushed a folder toward her without looking up. "How's your schedule for the week?" he said. "We have 3 more events to attend." Zarya flipped through the detailed itinerary. "Do you ever take a day off?" "No." "Maybe you should. You look tired." He glanced up, surprise flickering across his face. "I'm fine, if you say so." She helped herself to coffee. "But the bags under your eyes say differently." Jenkins appeared at Cassian's side, whispering something in his ear. Cassian's jaw tightened. "What is it?" Zarya asked. "Harold is requesting a meeting with the full board tomorrow. Unusual timing. You think it's about us?" "I know it is." Cassian stood abruptly. "I need to make some calls. Jenkins will show you around the estate today." After he left, Jenkins gave Zarya a tour of the mansion. The place was enormous. 26 rooms, a library that made her gasp with delight, gardens that stretched for acres. "And this wing is closed," Jenkins said as they passed a locked door. "Why?" "Mr. Blake's orders." Jenkins's expression revealed nothing. "It hasn't been opened since Miss Lillian's passing." Zarya's curiosity was piqued. "What was she like?" "Lillian?" Jenkins hesitated. "It's not my place to discuss the late Miss Green. I'm his wife now, Jenkins, even if it's just on paper." The older man studied her for a moment. "She was beautiful, talented, the daughter of one of Mr. Blake's early investors. They were engaged for 2 years. How did she die?" "A boating accident on the lake behind the property. Mr. Blake was devastated. He hasn't been the same since." "Was he with her when it happened?" "No. He was meant to be, but was delayed by work. Perhaps that's why he blames himself." Before Zarya could ask more questions, her phone rang. It was her grandmother. "Zarya Monroe, why am I seeing your face in the society pages?" Pearl demanded. "Married? To Cassian Blake, of all people?" Zarya winced. She should have known her grandmother would find out. "Grandma, I can explain. You're coming to Sunday dinner, and bringing this husband of yours." Pearl's tone brooked no argument. 4 o'clock. Don't be late." After she hung up, Zarya sank onto a nearby bench. How was she going to explain this to Cassian? That evening she found him in his home office, still working. "We need to talk," she said, stepping inside without knocking. He looked up, irritated. "I'm busy. My grandmother knows we're married. She wants us both at Sunday dinner. Send my regrets." "That's not how this works. You wanted a real-looking marriage. Real husbands meet their wives' families." Cassian leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You haven't told her the truth." "Of course not. I signed your NDA, remember?" He was quiet for a moment. "What would be expected of me at this dinner?" "Basic human conversation. Pretending to care about me. You know, the things normal husbands do." Something flashed in his eyes. Annoyance, maybe, or something else. "Fine. Sunday at 4. Thank you." Zarya turned to leave, then paused. "Jenkins showed me around today. He mentioned Lillian's wing." Cassian's face hardened. "That's off limits. To everyone. I wasn't asking to see it. I'm sorry for your loss." He looked back down at his papers. "If that's all, Mrs. Blake." Zarya bit back a retort and left. The man was impossible. The next day, Cassian returned from his board meeting in a dark mood. "Harold is demanding a full audit of my personal finances," he told Zarya as they prepared for another event. "He's questioning the timing of our marriage." "What did you tell him?" "That my personal life is none of his concern." Cassian adjusted his tie with quick, angry movements. "He's also pushing for a psychological evaluation before my birthday." "Can he do that?" "The board can request it." "If I refuse, it looks suspicious." Zarya watched him struggle with his cufflinks, his usually steady hands betraying his agitation. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "Let me," she said, taking his wrist gently. He froze at her touch, but didn't pull away. She fastened the cufflinks, aware of how close they were standing, of the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. "Thank you," he said quietly when she finished. Their eyes met, and for a moment something passed between them, a connection, a flash of understanding. Then his phone rang, breaking the spell. The charity auction that night was at an art gallery in Manhattan. As they arrived, Zarya noticed a beautiful blonde woman watching Cassian intently. "Who's that?" she whispered. "Rebecca Winters, Harold's daughter. We grew up together." The woman approached, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Cassian, it's been too long." "Rebecca." Cassian's voice was neutral. "You remember my wife, Zarya?" Rebecca turned cold eyes on Zarya. "Of course. The bookstore clerk. How quaint." "Actually, I'm working on opening my own store," Zarya replied, keeping her voice pleasant. "Children's books are my passion." "How sweet." Rebecca's tone suggested it was anything but. Cassian always did have a thing for projects. Cassian's hand tightened on Zaria's waist. Zaria is my wife, not a project. Of course. Rebecca smiled thinly. I'm just surprised. After Lillian, you swore you'd never marry. People change, Cassian said. Do they? Rebecca moved closer, lowering her voice. Daddy thinks you haven't changed at all. Still the same broken man who couldn't save the woman he loved. Zaria felt Cassian stiffen beside her. Before he could respond, she stepped in. It was lovely meeting you, Rebecca. If you'll excuse us, I see some friends we should greet. She steered Cassian away, feeling Rebecca's eyes burning into her back. She's in love with you, Zaria said when they were out of earshot. Rebecca has always wanted what she can't have. Cassian's voice was tight. First my father's approval, then my company. What did she mean about you not saving Lillian? Cassian's face closed off. It doesn't matter, but it clearly did. Later, as they drove home, Cassian was silent, lost in his own thoughts. Zaria watched the city lights pass, wondering about the man beside her. What had happened to make him so closed off, and why did she care? Sunday arrived, and to Zaria's surprise, Cassian was ready on time, dressed in what was probably his most casual outfit, dark jeans and a button-down shirt that still looked expensive. Remember, my grandmother doesn't know this is fake, Zaria reminded him as they drove to Queens. She raised me after my mum died. She's all the family I have. I understand the importance of family, Cassian said, looking out the window. Do you have any, besides Harold, I mean? My parents died when I was 12. Harold was my father's best friend. He took me in. So he raised you? And now he's trying to take your company? People aren't always what they seem. Cassian's voice was bitter, especially those closest to you. Pearl Monroe lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Queens. When they arrived, she was waiting at the door, arms crossed, eyes sharp as they assessed Cassian. So you're the billionaire who swept my granddaughter off her feet, she said without preamble. Grandma, Zaria warned. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Monroe, Cassian said, extending his hand. Pearl ignored it, instead pulling Zaria into a hug. You look thin. Is he feeding you in that big house? I'm fine, Grandma. Pearl finally turned to Cassian. Well, don't just stand there. Come in, dinner's getting cold. The apartment was small but immaculate, filled with family photos and hand-crocheted doilies. Zaria watched Cassian take it all in, wondering what he thought of such a normal, modest home. Over dinner, Pearl's famous pot roast, her grandmother grilled Cassian with all the intensity of an FBI interrogator. How exactly did you meet my granddaughter? Cassian repeated their cover story smoothly. And you just happened to fall in love with a bookstore clerk? A man in your position? Grandma, Zaria protested. It's all right, Cassian said. Your grandmother is right to be suspicious. Our relationship was unexpected. That's one word for it, Pearl said. The newspapers say you were engaged before. What happened to that girl? She died. Cassian's voice was flat. 3 years ago. Pearl's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry to hear that. Losing someone you love changes you. Something flickered in Cassian's eyes. Yes, it does. My Zaria knows about that too. Losing her mother so young. Pearl reached over to squeeze Zaria's hand. But she's always been strong. Hasn't let it make her hard. The look Pearl gave Cassian made it clear what she thought had happened to him. After dinner, while Zaria helped her grandmother with the dishes, Pearl spoke in a low voice. That man is carrying a world of pain, baby girl. I know, Zaria admitted. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Marriage isn't something to rush into. I love him, Grandma. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Pearl studied her face. Love born in a lie will either bloom into truth or burn you alive. Remember that. Zaria nearly dropped the plate she was drying. What do you mean? I mean that man is hiding something. And so are you. Pearl's eyes were knowing. Just be careful. Don't lose yourself trying to save him. On the drive back to Westchester, Cassian was quiet. Thank you for coming, Zaria said finally. My grandmother is important to me. She reminds me of my mother, Cassian said unexpectedly. Direct, perceptive. She likes you, I think, in her way. She thinks I'm not good enough for you. She's probably right. The simple honesty of his statement caught Zaria off guard. That's not true. Cassian glanced at her. Isn't it? This arrangement, it's not what you deserve. I'm a grown woman. I made my choice. Because you needed money. Yes, and you needed a wife. We're using each other, Cassian. Let's not pretend otherwise. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Back at the mansion, as they walked upstairs to their separate rooms, Cassian paused. Your grandmother asked about our honeymoon. I told her we hadn't had time yet. Quick thinking. It would look strange if we didn't take one. Zarya raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting we actually go on a honeymoon? It would be expected. We'll go to the house in Santorini next weekend. 4 days, for appearances. Greece? Zarya couldn't hide her surprise. That's a long way to go for appearances. The board is watching us closely. We need to be convincing. Okay, she agreed, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at the thought of 4 days alone with him. Santorini it is. The next morning, Jenkins informed Zarya that a reporter had requested an interview with the new Mrs. Blake. Mr. Blake has approved it, Jenkins said. The woman will be here at noon. What am I supposed to say? Zarya asked, panic rising. I barely know anything about his life. Mr. Blake has prepared some talking points. Jenkins handed her a folder. Just stick to these. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane Porter, arrived precisely at noon. Zarya met her in the sunroom, wearing one of the designer outfits that had mysteriously appeared in her closet. Mrs. Blake, thank you for speaking with me, Diane began. Your marriage has taken everyone by surprise. How did you and Cassian meet? Zarya repeated their cover story, keeping her voice warm as she described their fictional courtship. And what attracted you to Cassian? Diane asked, besides the obvious wealth and power. Cassian is more than what people see on the surface, Zarya said carefully. He's brilliant, of course, but he's also thoughtful, complicated. Complicated is one word for it. Many would say unstable after his public meltdown following Lillian Green's death. Zarya frowned. That's unfair. He lost someone he loved, spectacularly. The infamous charity gala incident. When he accused Harold Winters of being involved in Lillian's death, it was all over the news. This was news to Zarya. People say things they don't mean when they're grieving. And now he's suddenly married to you, a complete unknown. Diane's eyes were calculating. Some might wonder if this is just another episode. Our marriage is real, Zarya said firmly. And my husband is not unstable. Then why has he been hiding from the public for 3 years? Why the secrecy? And why marry so suddenly, just months before his 33rd birthday, when, coincidentally, he stands to gain control of his family trust? Zarya's heart raced. The woman knew too much. I think this interview is over. Just one more question, Mrs. Blake. Have you been to the East Wing yet? The one he's kept locked since Lillian died there. Lillian died in a boating accident, Zarya corrected. That's the official story. Diane smiled thinly. But there are other versions. You might want to ask your husband about them. After the reporter left, Zarya found Cassian in his study. You set me up, she accused. That reporter knew things I didn't. Cassian looked up, his expression guarded. What did she say? That you publicly accused Harold of being involved in Lillian's death. That there are other versions of how she died. Zarya crossed her arms. If I'm playing your wife, I need to know the whole story. Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Lillian didn't just die in a boating accident. She drowned in the lake behind this house the night before our wedding. I'm sorry, Zarya said softly. Harold was the last person to see her alive. They argued about something, he never said what. Hours later, her body was found in the lake. Cassian's voice was flat, emotionless. The investigation ruled it an accident. She'd been drinking, went out on the boat alone, fell. But you don't believe that. Lillian was afraid of water. She never would have gone out on that boat alone, especially after dark. You think Harold had something to do with it? I don't know. Cassian ran a hand through his hair. I was not in a good place after it happened. Said things publicly I shouldn't have. Harold used that to convince the board I was unstable. And the East Wing? That was Lillian's part of the house, her studio. She was an artist. He looked away. I haven't been able to go in there since. Zarya moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk. I understand grief, Cassian. My mother died when I was 10. Car accident. For years, I kept her bedroom exactly as it was. Did it help? He asked quietly. No, it just kept the pain fresh. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the walls around Cassian seemed to lower slightly. I should get back to work, he said finally, breaking the moment. Zarya stood. Of course. As she reached the door, he called after her. Zarya. She turned. Thank you for handling the reporter. It wasn't much, but from him, it felt significant. The next day, Zarya was surprised when Cassian suggested they have lunch together on the terrace. As they ate, he seemed almost relaxed, asking about her plans for the bookstore. I want it to be a place where kids feel safe, she explained. where they can escape into other worlds, like I did after my mom died. Books were my escape too, Cassian admitted. My father's library was the only place Harold wouldn't follow me. You really don't like him, do you? Harold raised me because it was expected, not because he wanted to. His real focus was always on grooming Rebecca to take over my father's company. When I showed more aptitude, he resented it. Is that why he's trying to force you out now? Partly. But it's more than that. Cassian hesitated. Harold has always wanted Blake Technologies for himself. My father knew that. It's why the trust was set up the way it was. With the marriage clause. Cassian nodded. My father believed family was the foundation of stability. He wanted to make sure whoever controlled the company had that foundation. But you could have married anyone. Why me? You were... He paused, searching for the right word. Authentic. Everyone else in my world wants something from me. You just wanted a job. Zarya smiled slightly. Well, and a lot of money. The corner of his mouth twitched. Yes, that too. Their conversation was interrupted when Jenkins appeared with an urgent message. Cassian's face darkened as he read it. What is it? Zarya asked. Harold has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. He's bringing in a private investigator's report. About us. Almost certainly. Cassian stood. Pack for Santorini. We're leaving tonight. Tonight? But you said next weekend. Plans change. The board meeting is in 4 days. We need to be seen as a happy couple on our honeymoon before then. 4 hours later, they were on Cassian's private jet, flying to Greece. Zarya stared out the window, watching New York disappear beneath them. Try to sleep, Cassian advised. It's a long flight. But Zarya couldn't sleep. Her mind was racing with everything she'd learned. Cassian's fiancé dying mysteriously, his public accusation against Harold, the locked wing that held so many painful memories, and now they were flying to a romantic island for a fake honeymoon to convince the world and Harold that their marriage was real. The problem was, Zarya was beginning to forget it wasn't. Every time Cassian lowered his guard even slightly, she glimpsed the man beneath the cold exterior. A man who was hurt, not heartless, damaged, but not beyond repair. She glanced across the cabin where Cassian was working on his laptop, his face illuminated by the screen. He must have felt her gaze because he looked up, their eyes meeting across the dim space. What? He asked. Nothing. She looked away. Just thinking. About this situation. Us. How strange it all is. He was quiet for a moment. Do you regret it? Our arrangement? Did she? The money would change her life, but there was more to it now. Something she wasn't ready to name. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. Something flickered in his eyes. Relief, perhaps. Good. As the plane continued east toward Santorini, Zarya couldn't help wondering what the next few days would bring. They were playing a dangerous game, not just with Harold and the board, but with their own emotions. And as her grandmother had warned, love born in a lie would either bloom into truth or burn them both alive. Zarya just wasn't sure which outcome she feared more. Dawn was breaking over the Aegean Sea when their plane landed in Santorini. Zarya, who had finally dozed off during the flight, woke to Cassian gently touching her shoulder. We're here, he said quietly. The island was even more beautiful than the pictures she'd seen. Whitewashed buildings with blue domes cascading down cliffs, the deep blue sea stretching to the horizon. A car was waiting to take them to Cassian's villa. You own a house here? Zarya asked as they drove along winding roads. My father bought it for my mother on their 10th anniversary. I haven't been back since they died. The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. Why now? It seemed appropriate for a honeymoon. His eyes met hers briefly. And the staff is discreet. No risk of leaks to the press. The villa was perched on a cliff overlooking the sea, private and secluded. White walls, blue shutters, a terrace with an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean. It was breathtaking. An older Greek woman greeted them at the door. Mr. Blake, it has been too long. She hugged Cassian warmly, then turned to Zarya. And this must be your bride. Welcome, Mrs. Blake. This is Elena, Cassian explained. She's taken care of this house since my parents owned it. Come, come. Elena ushered them inside. You must be tired from your journey. I've prepared breakfast on the terrace. The interior of the villa was airy and elegant, with high ceilings and large windows that framed the sea view. Elena led them to a terrace where a table was set with fresh fruit, pastries and coffee. I'll show you to your rooms after you eat, she said, bustling away. Zarya raised an eyebrow at Cassian. Rooms? Plural? I assumed you'd want your own space. He poured coffee for both of them. This isn't a real honeymoon after all, right? She ignored the twinge of disappointment. Of course. They ate in companionable silence, watching the sun rise higher over the sea. The beauty of the place was almost overwhelming after the tension of New York. What's the plan? Zarya asked finally. For our fake honeymoon? We'll be seen in town, dining, shopping. There's a famous sunset spot where newlyweds take photos. Cassian's voice was all business. We need to be visible but not obvious about it. And, between public appearances, you're free to do as you please. Swim, read, explore. I have some work to finish. Zarya frowned. You brought work on our honeymoon? It's not a real... I know it's not real, she interrupted. But it needs to look real. A workaholic on his honeymoon doesn't look real, Cassian. He seemed surprised by her firmness. What do you suggest? That you actually relax for once, swim, eat good food, pretend you're happy to be married to me. She stood up. Now, I'm going to unpack and then explore. You can join me or you can work. Your choice. She left him looking slightly stunned. Her room was beautiful, airy and white with a balcony overlooking the sea. The adjoining bathroom had a massive tub set by a window with the same stunning view. A door connected her room to what she assumed was Cassian's suite. After unpacking, Zarya changed into a sundress and sandals. To her surprise, Cassian was waiting in the living room, his laptop nowhere in sight. I thought we could walk into town together, he said. If you're still interested in exploring. Zarya smiled. I'd like that. They walked down the winding path toward the main village of Oya. The day was warm, but not hot, a gentle breeze coming off the sea. Cassian seemed to know his way around, pointing out landmarks and sharing bits of history. You've spent time here before, Zarya observed. Summers when I was a child, before my parents died. His face softened with the memory. My mother loved this island. She said it was where she felt most alive. I can see why, it's magical. In town they wandered through narrow streets lined with shops and cafes. Cassian was more relaxed than Zarya had ever seen him, the perpetual tension in his shoulders easing slightly. When they stopped for lunch at a small taverna, he actually smiled at something she said, a real smile that transformed his face. You should do that more often, she told him. Do what? Smile. It suits you. He looked away, almost embarrassed. It's been a while since I've had reason to. After lunch, they continued exploring. In a small bookshop, Zarya found a collection of Greek children's stories translated into English. For my future store, she explained, as Cassian paid for it despite her protests. Consider it a souvenir, he said. As they exited the shop, a couple approached them. American tourists who recognized Cassian. You're Cassian Blake, the woman exclaimed. I read about your wedding. This must be your wife. Cassian tensed but smoothly put his arm around Zarya's waist. Yes, this is Zarya. We're on our honeymoon too, the man said. Would you mind if we took a photo together? No one back home will believe we met you. Before Cassian could refuse, Zarya smiled warmly. We'd be happy to. The four posed together, Cassian's arm still around Zarya's waist, her head resting naturally against his shoulder. As the couple thanked them and walked away, Cassian kept his arm where it was. That will be online within the hour, he murmured. Good. It's what we came for, right? But Zarya was acutely aware of his touch, the warmth of his body next to hers. They continued walking, his arms still around her. To anyone watching, they were just another couple in love. By sunset, they had made their way to the famous lookout point Cassian had mentioned, a spot where dozens of tourists gathered each evening to watch the sun sink into the sea. As predicted, several people recognized Cassian, phones discreetly, and not so discreetly, capturing images of the newlywed Blakes. Should we give them something to photograph? Zarya asked softly. Cassian looked down at her, something unreadable in his eyes. What did you have in mind? In answer, Zarya reached up and straightened his collar, letting her hand linger on his chest, playing the part of the adoring wife. Cassian caught her hand in his, then slowly raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. The intimacy of the gesture caught her off guard. This wasn't just for show, or if it was, he was a better actor than she'd given him credit for. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Cassian pulled her closer. They're still watching, he whispered. Then we should make it convincing, she whispered back. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, Cassian lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost hesitant, but when Zarya responded, it deepened into something more. His arms tightened around her waist, and she found herself clinging to his shoulders, lost in the moment. When they finally broke apart, Both slightly breathless, the sun had disappeared completely. "That should give them something to talk about," Cassian said, his voice rough. But Zarya wondered if he felt what she did, that the kiss had crossed a line from pretend into something dangerously real. Back at the villa, Eleanor had prepared dinner for them on the terrace, lit by candles and the stars above. They ate mostly in silence, both seemingly lost in thought. "More wine?" Cassian offered, breaking the silence. "I think I've had enough." Zarya's head was already spinning, though whether from the wine or the kiss she wasn't sure. "Zarya, about earlier." "It's fine," she interrupted quickly. "We're supposed to look like newlyweds." It was convincing. Yes, he studied his wineglass. Convincing. After dinner, they moved to sit by the infinity pool, the lights of the village twinkling below them. The night was warm, the air fragrant with jasmine. "Tell me about your parents," Zarya said, wanting to break the tension between them. "You said they used to come here?" Cassian was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "My father was a lot like me, driven, focused on work. My mother was his opposite, warm, artistic, full of life." His voice softened with memory. "She made him better, made him stop and notice the world." "She sounds wonderful." She was. He looked out at the darkness. "When they died, plane crash on the way back from London, I was lost. Harold stepped in, but he wasn't nurturing. He saw me as an investment, not a child. That's awful. It made me stronger, more determined to succeed." Cassian glanced at her. "What about your mother? What was she like?" "Beautiful. Funny. She worked 2 jobs to support us, but she always made time to read to me before bed." Zarya smiled at the memory. "That's why books mean so much to me. They connect me to her." "Is that why you want to open a children's bookstore?" "Partly. I also believe books can save kids. They saved me after she died." Zarya hugged her knees to her chest. "Grandma did her best, but she was grieving too. Books were my escape." Cassian reached out hesitantly, touching her hand. "I understand that." The simple gesture, the connection of shared loss, felt more intimate than their kiss had been. Later, as they said goodnight outside their respective bedroom doors, Cassian paused. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For today, for making this," he gestured vaguely, "easier than it could have been." Zarya smiled. "You're welcome. Good night, Cassian." "Good night, Zarya." In her room, Zarya replayed the day in her mind. The beauty of the island, Cassian's unexpected openness, that kiss at sunset. It was becoming harder to remember that this was all temporary, a business arrangement with an expiration date. She was just drifting off to sleep when a knock at the connecting door startled her. "Zarya?" Cassian's voice was urgent. "Are you awake?" She opened the door to find him still fully dressed, his face tense. "What's wrong?" "Harold's investigator has been asking questions about our marriage license. He's traced the records to the clerk who processed it. Can he prove anything?" "Not yet, but we need to be careful." Cassian ran a hand through his hair. "There's more. Rebecca has been posting on social media about Lillian, old photos, memories, making sure everyone remembers. She's trying to hurt you. She's trying to remind the board of my instability after Lillian died." His jaw clenched. "Harold is going to use it against me at the meeting. When do we go back?" "Tomorrow night. The board meets the following morning." Zarya touched his arm. "We'll be ready. Today was good. People saw us, took pictures. We looked happy." "We did, didn't we?" Something in his expression softened. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we should be seen at breakfast in town. The more public, the better." After he left, Zarya lay awake for a long time. This game they were playing was becoming more complicated by the day, not just because of Harold and his schemes, but because of the feelings growing between them, feelings neither of them had bargained for. The next morning they had breakfast at a cafe in the main square, holding hands across the table, smiling at each other, playing the part of newlyweds for anyone watching, except it didn't feel like playing anymore, at least not to Zarya. After breakfast, Cassian surprised her by suggesting they spend the day at a private beach, accessible only from their villa. "Elena has packed us a picnic," he said. "I thought it would be good to relax before heading back to face the board." The beach was a small cove with soft sand and crystal-clear water. They swam, sunbathed, and talked more than they ever had before. Cassian told her stories about his parents, about his early days building his company. Zarya shared her dreams for the bookstore, the kinds of programs she wanted to run for kids from disadvantaged backgrounds. "You're good with children?" Cassian asked. "I volunteer at a literacy program in Queens, or I did before." She gestured between them. "All this. You miss it?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. The contract doesn't prevent you from continuing your volunteer work. We could arrange for security, of course. The thoughtfulness of the offer touched her. Thank you. I'd like that. As the afternoon wore on, Cassian received an email that darkened his mood. Harold has scheduled a press conference for after the board meeting. He's confident. He hasn't won yet, Zarya reminded him. He fights dirty. Always has. Cassian stared out at the sea. There are things you don't know, Zarya. About Lillian, about what happened. Tell me. He took a deep breath. Lillian and I were engaged for 2 years. The wedding was set for June 15th, 3 years ago. The night before we had a fight. About Harold, actually. Lillian thought I was too hard on him, that I should trust him more. Cassian's voice grew distant. She stormed out. I let her go. Thought she needed space. Zarya waited, sensing there was more. Later that night, Harold called me. Said he'd seen Lillian at the lake, that she was upset. By the time I got there, his voice broke slightly. She was already in the water. They said she'd been drinking, took the boat out, fell. You don't believe that. Lillian was terrified of water. Ever since she nearly drowned as a child, she wouldn't have gone near that boat, especially not after drinking. What do you think happened? Cassian's eyes were haunted. I think she and Harold argued. I think something went wrong. Whether he pushed her or she fell trying to get away from him, I don't know, but he was the last person to see her alive. Did you tell the police? Of course, but there was no evidence, just my suspicions. And Harold is very well connected. Cassian's face hardened. After the funeral, I became obsessed with proving he was involved. I neglected the company, made accusations publicly, had a breakdown at a charity gala. That's what the reporter mentioned. Yes, Harold used it all against me. Convinced the board I was unfit to lead. Got my voting rights restricted. The marriage clause was my father's way of ensuring the company would be led by someone stable with family values. Harold never imagined I would actually marry again. Until I came along. Yes? Cassian looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Until you. As the sun began to set, they gathered their things to head back to the villa. They needed to pack for the late flight back to New York. Walking up the path from the beach, Cassian suddenly stopped. I've been unfair to you, Zarya, pulling you into this mess. My fight with Harold isn't your battle. I signed up for this, she reminded him, eyes open. Did you? I'm not sure either of us knew what we were getting into. The honesty of his words hung between them. Back at the villa, as they packed their bags, Elena came to say goodbye. It has been a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Blake, she said, hugging Zarya warmly. You have brought light back to this house. To him, she nodded toward Cassian, who was on the phone in the next room. Thank you for your hospitality, Zarya replied, touched by the woman's words. He has been alone too long, Elena continued, her voice low. After his parents, after Miss Lillian, he closed his heart. But I see how he looks at you. It's complicated, Zarya said, not knowing how else to respond. Love always is. Eleanor patted her hand. But it is worth it. On the flight back to New York, Cassian reviewed documents for the board meeting while Zarya pretended to read. Her mind was too full of everything that had happened in Santorini. The conversations, the kiss, the growing connection between them that was becoming impossible to ignore. You should sleep, Cassian said, noticing her distraction. Tomorrow will be challenging. What happens if Harold convinces the board? If they don't believe our marriage is real? Then I lose controlling interest in the company my father built. The company becomes vulnerable to a hostile takeover, likely orchestrated by Harold himself. We won't let that happen, Zarya said firmly. Cassian looked at her with surprise. We? Yes, we. I'm your wife, remember? Even if it's just on paper. Something shifted in his expression. Thank you. It was nearly dawn when they landed in New York. As they drove back to the estate, Cassian's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened. When? He demanded. How many? After hanging up, he turned to Zarya. The police are at the estate. There was a break-in last night. Was anyone hurt? No, but they targeted the East Wing, Lillian's wing. Zarya's stomach dropped. What did they take? Nothing, according to Jenkins, but they left something. Cassian's voice was tight with anger. Photos of Lillian, scattered around her studio, and a note. What did it say? The truth always comes out. The police were still at the estate when they arrived. Jenkins met them at the door, his usually impassive face showing strain. They came through the garden entrance, sir, disabled the alarm. They knew exactly where to go. Show me, Cassian demanded. For the first time since Zarya had known him, Cassian unlocked the door to the East Wing. She followed him down a long hallway to a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. An artist's studio, with canvases stacked against walls, paint supplies gathered dust on tables, and on the floor, scattered like fallen leaves, dozens of photographs of Lillian Green, beautiful, smiling, alive. Cassian's face was ashen as he knelt to pick one up. "This was in my private safe, in my office." A detective approached. "Mr. Blake will need to dust for prints, but this looks professional." They knew the security system, knew where to find these photos. "It was Harold," Cassian said flatly, "or someone working for him. We'll need more than suspicions, sir." After the police left, promising to continue their investigation, Cassian remained in Lillian's studio. Zaria stood in the doorway, unsure if she should enter or leave him alone. "She was talented," she said softly, looking at the paintings, abstract works full of color and movement. "Yes, she was." Cassian stood by the windows, staring out at the lake where Lillian had died. "Harold's warning is clear. If I challenge him at the board meeting, he'll drag everything up again, make me look unstable, question our marriage. What are you going to do?" "What I have to." He turned to face her, his expression resolute. "Fight." "I'll be right there with you," Zaria promised. Cassian crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "This isn't your fight, Zaria. I can release you from the contract, give you the money we agreed on. You don't have to be dragged further into this mess." "Is that what you want?" He held her gaze. "No, but it would be the right thing to do. Let me decide what's right for me." Zaria squeezed his hands. "I'm not walking away, Cassian. Not now." The vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke her heart. This man who had lost so much, his parents, his fiancée, nearly his company, was afraid of losing her too. "Thank you," he whispered. Impulsively, Zaria reached up and kissed him, not for show this time, not for any cameras or witnesses, just because she wanted to. For a moment, Cassian froze in surprise. Then his arms went around her, pulling her closer, kissing her back with an intensity that left her breathless. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "This wasn't part of our arrangement," he said softly. "I know." She smiled slightly. "Consider it a bonus." That night, they slept in their separate rooms, as always, but something had changed between them. A line had been crossed, a truth acknowledged. The next morning, as they prepared to leave for the board meeting, Cassian seemed calmer than Zaria had ever seen him, determined, focused. "Whatever happens today," he told her as they stood in the foyer, "I want you to know that meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me in a very long time." Zaria straightened his tie, her hands lingering on his chest. "Save the speeches for after we win." He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." At the Blake Technologies headquarters in Manhattan, the tension was palpable. Employees stared as Cassian and Zaria walked through the lobby, whispers following in their wake. In the elevator, Cassian took her hand. "Ready?" Zaria nodded. "Ready." The boardroom was already full when they entered. 12 men and women in expensive suits, Harold at the head of the table. His eyes narrowed when he saw Zaria. "Cassian, how nice of you to join us. And you brought your wife." The way he said the word made it clear what he thought of their marriage. "Good morning, Harold." Cassian's voice was cool as he led Zaria to seats at the opposite end of the table. "Shall we begin?" Harold smiled thinly. "By all means. The first item on our agenda is a matter of grave concern to this board. The mental fitness of our CEO. What followed was character assassination disguised as corporate concern. Harold presented a timeline of Cassian's erratic behavior following Lillian's death, the public accusations, the withdrawal from society, the suspicious sudden marriage. "And now," Harold concluded, "we're asked to believe that Cassian has miraculously recovered, found love again with a woman none of us had heard of until a few weeks ago, a woman with no connections, no status, hired as a caretaker just days before their supposed whirlwind romance." Murmurs ran around the table. Harold produced a file. "This report from a private investigator raises serious questions about the legitimacy of this marriage. The timing, mere months before Cassian's 33rd birthday, when he stands to gain control of the Blake Trust, is suspicious at best, fraudulent at worst." Cassian remained calm. "Are you finished, Harold?" "Not quite. There's also the matter of the break-in at your estate. Another troubling incident in a pattern of drama that surrounds you." "A break-in you orchestrated," Cassian said evenly. Harold's eyes widened in mock offense. "That's a serious accusation. Perhaps another example of your paranoia." "Enough." One of the board members, an older woman, raised her hand. "We've heard your concerns, Harold, but I'd like to hear from Mrs. Blake." All eyes turned to Zaria. She felt Cassian tense beside her. Mrs. Blake, the woman continued, how would you respond to the suggestion that your marriage is merely a business arrangement? Zaria took a deep breath. This was the moment everything hinged on. She could stick to the script, repeat the cover story they'd crafted so carefully, or she could tell the truth, her truth. She chose the latter. When I first met Cassian, it was for a job interview. I was desperate, broke, facing eviction, drowning in student loans. Honesty felt strangely freeing. And yes, there was an arrangement. I'm not going to lie about that. Cassian stiffened beside her. This wasn't the plan. But what started as an arrangement became something else. Zaria looked directly at Harold. I got to know the man behind the headlines. The man who's been hurt, who's lost too much, who's been fighting alone for too long. She turned to the board members. Cassian Blake is not unstable. He's not erratic. He's someone who had his world shattered and has been trying to put it back together. And yes, our beginning was unconventional, but what I feel for him now is real. Zaria reached for Cassian's hand. I was hired, yes, but I fell for the man he didn't even know he still was. I stayed for him, not the house, not the money. She looked at Cassian, whose expression was one of stunned disbelief. But if I walk away now, I want you to chase me because you love me, not because you need me. Silence fell over the boardroom. Harold's face had darkened with fury. The other board members exchanged glances. Cassian stood slowly. Zaria, but she was already rising, gathering her purse. I've said what I needed to say. The rest is up to you. And with her head held high, Zaria walked out of the boardroom, out of the building, and into the bright New York morning. She didn't look back, couldn't bear to see Cassian's face, the betrayal, the anger she was sure would be there. She'd gone off script, potentially ruined everything he'd been working for, but she couldn't lie anymore. Not about her feelings, not about what had been growing between them since that first dinner in his cold, elegant dining room. As she stood on the sidewalk trying to decide where to go, her phone rang. It was her grandmother. How are you, baby girl? Pearl asked. I haven't heard from you in days. I think I just did something really stupid, Grandma, Zaria said, her voice shaking. Come home, Pearl said simply. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. An hour later, Zaria was sitting at her grandmother's kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold in front of her as she explained everything. The arrangement with Cassian, the fake marriage that had become increasingly real, at least for her, and finally her impromptu speech at the board meeting. So you love him, Pearl said when she finished. Not a question, a statement. I don't know. But she did know. She just wasn't ready to admit it. It doesn't matter. He needed a business partner, not a real wife. Are you sure about that? The way you describe it sounds like there was something real growing between you. Even if there was, I ruined it. I went off script. Admitted our marriage started as an arrangement. He'll lose the company now. Pearl took Zaria's hands in hers. Baby, if that man cares more about his company than he does about you telling the truth, then he's not worth your tears. Zaria's phone had been silent all day. No calls, no texts from Cassian. She told herself it was what she expected, but the disappointment still cut deep. As evening fell, she helped her grandmother prepare dinner, trying to lose herself in the familiar routine. They were just sitting down to eat when there was a knock at the door. Are you expecting someone? Zaria asked. Pearl's eyes twinkled. No, but you might be. Heart suddenly pounding, Zaria went to answer the door, and there he was, Cassian looking tired but determined, a worn book clutched in his hand. You left, he said simply. I had to. I know. He held out the book. I found this. Thought you might want it. Zaria took it, surprised to see it was a worn copy of The Secret Garden, her favorite childhood book. How did you know? You mentioned it once, when we were discussing your bookstore. The fact that he'd remembered such a small detail made her heart ache. Cassian, I'm sorry if I ruined things with the board. You didn't. His eyes held hers. What you said, it changed everything. What do you mean? After you left, the board voted. Harold's motion was defeated. The trust passes to me on my birthday, as my father intended. That's wonderful. Relief flooded through her. I'm so happy for you. There's more. Cassian stepped closer. Harold resigned, effective immediately, and on his way out, he admitted something. What? The night Lillian died, they argued because she'd discovered he was embezzling from the company. He didn't push her, but he didn't help her when she fell into the lake either. He let her drown. Zaria gasped. Oh, Cassian, it's over. All of it. His voice broke slightly. And I realized something. Standing there after you left, after everything was finally resolved. What? That none of it mattered without you. He took her hands in his. I don't need a wife for the board. I need you. Not as a role, not as a symbol, as the woman who saw through me and stayed anyway. Zaria's heart felt too full for words. Instead, she did what felt most natural. She reached up and kissed him, pouring all her confused, wonderful feelings into the gesture. When they broke apart, Cassian was smiling, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. Is that a yes? A yes to what? You haven't asked me anything. To staying. Not for the contract, not for the money, but because maybe somehow this arrangement has become something real. From the doorway to the kitchen, Pearl cleared her throat. Dinner's getting cold, and it sounds like you two have a lot to talk about. Over Pearl's famous pot roast, they began to plan a future neither of them had anticipated when they'd first met. A future not bound by contracts or business arrangements, but by something much more fragile and precious. As they left Pearl's apartment later that night, Cassian stopped Zaria on the steps. There's something else you should know, he said. I'm turning the east wing of the house into a children's library, in Lillian's memory, and for you. Tears filled Zaria's eyes. Really? She would have liked you, I think, and she would have loved your dream of helping children through books. Thank you. Zaria squeezed his hand. For letting her go, for making room for something new. You make it possible, he said simply. You make me want to try again. As they drove back to the estate, their home, Zaria thought about her grandmother's warning. Love born in a lie would either bloom into truth or burn them alive. Against all odds, theirs had bloomed into truth. 3 months had passed since the dramatic board meeting. The Blake estate, once cold and silent, had transformed. The east wing was under renovation, its locked doors finally open, sunlight streaming through windows that had been shuttered for too long. Zaria stood in what would soon be the children's library, watching workers install bookshelves along the walls. Cassian's gift to her, a space where she could begin building her dream while still living at the estate. What do you think? Cassian asked, coming to stand beside her. Is it what you imagined? It's better. She leaned against him, his arm automatically going around her waist. I never expected to start this way, with funding, with support. You deserve it. He pressed a kiss to her temple. The contractors say it'll be ready for the grand opening next month. The grand opening. Sometimes Zaria still couldn't believe how much her life had changed, from nearly being evicted to helping create a library for underprivileged children, from a fake wife to, well, that part was still complicated. Though they'd admitted their feelings for each other, though Cassian had asked her to stay, they were still technically bound by their original contract. 1 year of marriage, then divorce. They hadn't discussed changing those terms, despite everything that had happened between them. Your birthday dinner is tonight, Zaria reminded him. Are you ready for the big 3-3? Today was the day Cassian would officially gain control of the Blake family trust. The board vote had been merely a preliminary victory. Today the final legal hurdles would be cleared. Jenkins has been cooking since dawn. Cassian smiled. I think he's more excited than I am. Your parents would be proud, Zaria said softly. Something flickered in Cassian's eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or love. He still found it hard to express his emotions, years of closing himself off not easily undone. But he was trying, and that meant everything to Zaria. I invited your grandmother, he said. I hope that's okay. Of course it is. Zaria was touched by the gesture. She'll be thrilled. As they walked back through the mansion, Zaria marveled at how different it felt now. Still elegant, still grand, but no longer cold. Fresh flowers appeared in vases. Windows were open to let in air and sunlight. The staff made eye contact, sometimes even smiled. Just like their employer, the house was coming back to life. In her suite, which she still maintained separate from Cassian's, another complication they hadn't addressed, Zaria found a box on her bed. Inside was a stunning emerald green dress with a note, for tonight. See. The gesture was typical of the new Cassian, thoughtful, generous, but still maintaining a certain reserve. They had grown closer over the past months, sharing meals, conversations, even kisses, but he never pushed for more, and Zaria hadn't asked. They were in a strange limbo, more than business partners, less than true husband and wife. Sometimes she wondered if he was waiting for her to make the next move. Other times, she feared he was simply fulfilling the contract, being kind to her until their year was up. Tonight, she decided they would finally talk about their future. Dressed in the beautiful gown, Zaria made her way downstairs where guests were beginning to arrive. The board members, minus Harold, were there, along with key executives from Blake Technologies. Pearl arrived, elegant in a royal blue dress that Zarya had helped her pick out. "Look at this place," Pearl whispered, glancing around the grand foyer. "And to think my granddaughter is the lady of the house." "Temporarily," Zarya reminded her, the contract never far from her mind. Pearl fixed her with a knowing look. "We'll see about that." Cassian appeared, handsome in a tailored suit, his face lighting up when he saw Zarya. "You look beautiful," he said, taking her hand and kissing it. "Not so bad yourself, birthday boy." She straightened his tie, a gesture that had become natural between them. The dinner was elegant but warm, conversation flowing easily around the table. Cassian, seated at the head with Zarya to his right, seemed relaxed in a way she'd never seen before. When his lawyer arrived with the trust documents, everyone applauded. "As of today," the lawyer announced, "Cassian Blake assumes full control of the Blake Family Trust, as stipulated by the late Edward Blake. All conditions have been met." More applause. Cassian stood to make a toast. "To my father, whose foresight created this company. To my mother, who taught me there's more to life than business." He paused, his eyes finding Zarya's. "And to my wife, without whom none of this would have been possible." The guests raised their glasses. "To Zarya." Later, as the party wound down, Zarya found herself on the terrace, gazing out at the lake. The water was silver in the moonlight, beautiful despite the tragedy it had witnessed. "Penny for your thoughts," Cassian said, joining her. "Just thinking about how much has changed. For both of us." He nodded, looking out at the water. "I had the boat removed. It's time to stop dwelling in the past." The simple statement spoke volumes about his healing process. "Cassian, we need to talk. About us. About the contract." His face grew serious. "I know. Our arrangement was for 1 year. After that, we divorce, I get my payout, and we go our separate ways." Zarya took a deep breath. "Is that still what you want?" Before Cassian could answer, Jenkins appeared at the terrace door. "Excuse me, sir. There's an urgent call from Tokyo. The merger." Cassian hesitated, clearly torn. "Go," Zarya said. "We can talk later." He squeezed her hand before following Jenkins inside, leaving Zarya alone with her thoughts and the moonlit lake. Pearl found her there a few minutes later. "Everything okay, baby girl?" "Just complicated, Grandma. Love usually is." Pearl settled beside her on the bench. "Have you told him yet?" "Told him what?" "That you love him, really love him, not just pretend." Zarya sighed. "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. The rest, contracts, arrangements, business, that's what's complicated." Pearl took her granddaughter's hand. "Life's too short for maybes, Zarya. Your mama taught me that." After the guests left, Zarya waited for Cassian to finish his call. When midnight came and he was still locked in his office, she finally went to bed, their conversation postponed once again. The next morning she woke to find a note slipped under her door. "Meet me in the library at 10. See, the main library was on the ground floor, a magnificent room lined with leather-bound books. When Zarya arrived, Cassian was waiting, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Sorry about last night," he said. "The Tokyo call went longer than expected." "It's fine. Business comes first, I understand." "No." His voice was firm. "That's the problem. It doesn't come first. Not anymore." He gestured for her to sit on one of the leather couches, then took a seat across from her. "Our contract," he began. 1 year of marriage, then divorce. Those were the terms." "Yes." Zarya's heart sank. Was he about to suggest they end it early, now that he had control of the trust? "I'd like to propose an amendment." She blinked. "An amendment?" "The original agreement was a business arrangement, but things have changed. I've changed." Cassian leaned forward. "I don't want a fake wife anymore, Zarya." Her breath caught. "What do you want?" "A real one." His eyes held hers. "I want to tear up the contract. Start over. Do this right." Hope bloomed in her chest. "What exactly are you saying, Cassian?" "I'm saying I love you, not as part of a deal, not for appearances." He moved to kneel in front of her, taking her hands in his. "I love you for bringing light back into this house, for seeing me at my worst and staying anyway, for making me want to be better." Tears filled Zarya's eyes. "I love you too. I have for a while now. Then marry me, for real this time." She laughed through her tears. "We're already married, remember? On paper, but not in here." He touched his heart. "I want to do it right. A real ceremony. Friends, family, your grandmother walking you down the aisle." "Are you sure? What about the board, the company?" "The company is secure now, and even if it wasn't..." He shook his head. "When you walked out of that boardroom, I realized something. All of this, the house, the company, the money, none of it matters without you. Zaria reached out to touch his face, still hardly believing this was real. "Yes, I'll marry you, again, for real this time." He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left no doubt about his feelings. When they broke apart, Cassian smiled, that full, genuine smile that had once been so rare. "I have something else to show you." He led her to his office where blueprints were spread across his desk. "Your bookstore. I've purchased a building in Queens, not far from your grandmother's place. Construction starts next month if you approve the plans." Zaria stared at the blueprints, recognizing her dream taking shape on paper. "Cassian, this is... I don't know what to say." "Say you'll run it. Make it the safe haven for kids that you've always wanted." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You can divide your time between there and the library here. The best of both worlds." "Our worlds," she corrected, leaning back against him. "Not yours or mine anymore, ours." 6 weeks later, Zaria stood in the foyer of the Blake estate, her home now in every sense, dressed in a simple white gown. Pearl, elegant in lavender, waited to walk her down the aisle that had been created in the garden. "Ready, baby girl?" Pearl asked, adjusting Zaria's veil. "More than ready, Grandma." The garden had been transformed with white flowers and twinkling lights. A small gathering of friends waited. Jenkins and the staff, board members who had become friends, children from Zaria's literacy program. At the end of the aisle stood Cassian, his face lighting up as Zaria appeared. This was so different from their first clinical ceremony at City Hall. This was real, chosen. As Pearl placed Zaria's hand in Cassian's, she whispered something that made him smile and nod solemnly. "What did she say?" Zaria whispered as they turned to face the minister. "That she'll hold me personally responsible if I ever make you cry," he whispered back, "and that she's glad I'm not as cold as I first seemed." Zaria squeezed his hand. "You never were." "Not really." Their vows were simple, but heartfelt. No contracts this time, no business arrangements, just promises made out of love. "I, Cassian, take you, Zaria, to be my wife, not for appearances, not for business, but because you've shown me how to live again. I promise to cherish you, support your dreams, and love you every day for the rest of our lives." Tears filled Zaria's eyes as she responded. "I, Zaria, take you, Cassian, to be my husband, not for security, not for money, but because you've shown me what real partnership means. I promise to stand by you, challenge you when you need it, and love you through whatever life brings." As they exchanged rings, new ones chosen together, Cassian leaned in to whisper, "No more positions that come with rings, just us." The kiss that sealed their vows was a promise of healing, of growth, of a future neither could have imagined when they first met. At the reception held in the newly renovated East Wing, Cassian surprised everyone by taking Zaria's hand and leading her to the dance floor. "I thought you didn't dance except when necessary," she teased. "Some things are worth making exceptions for," he replied, pulling her close as the music began. As they swayed together, Zaria caught sight of a newly installed stained glass window. It depicted a garden coming into bloom, with a small plaque beneath it. "In memory of Lillian Green, who loved beauty and art, and in honor of new beginnings." The gesture touched Zaria deeply. Cassian had found a way to honor his past while embracing his future. "Happy?" he asked, noticing the direction of her gaze. "Very." She rested her head against his chest. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible." Later, as guests mingled and celebrated, Pearl cornered the newlyweds. "So, when can I expect great-grandchildren?" "Grandma!" Zaria exclaimed, embarrassed. But Cassian just laughed, a sound that had once been so rare in this house. "We're discussing it, Mrs. Monroe, but we have some other projects to finish first. The library opens next week," Zaria explained, "and the bookstore the month after that." Pearl's eyes twinkled. "Well, don't wait too long. I'm not getting any younger, you know." After she walked away, Cassian turned to Zaria with a raised eyebrow. "We are discussing it." "We could be." Zaria smiled up at him. "If you want to. A family." He said the word as if testing how it felt. "I'd like that. Someday." "Someday," she agreed. "We've got time." And they did. All the time in the world. What had begun as a business arrangement, a position that came with a ring, had blossomed into something neither of them had been looking for. A second chance at love, at family, at happiness. 2 months later, Zaria stood before a crowd of excited children and proud parents at the grand opening of New Chapters, her bookstore in Queens. The bright, welcoming space was everything she'd dreamed of. Cozy reading nooks, well-stocked shelves, and a special section for story time. "Welcome, everyone," she said. her grandmother and husband standing proudly beside her. "This store is a dream come true for me. Books were my safe haven as a child, and I hope new chapters will be that for many children to come." As she cut the ribbon, cheers erupted. Children streamed in, eager to explore. Cassian squeezed her hand. "You did it," he said proudly. "We did it," she corrected him. Pearl wiped away a tear. "Your mama would be so proud, baby girl." The day was a whirlwind of excitement. Story time, face painting, author readings. Throughout it all, Cassian remained by Zaria's side, helping wherever needed, watching her shine in her element. That evening, after locking up the store, they walked hand in hand to the car, tired but happy. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," Zaria said as they drove back to the estate. "I've been waiting for the right moment." Cassian glanced at her. "Sounds serious." "It is." She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The car swerved slightly as Cassian's head whipped toward her. "What? When? How?" She laughed. "I think you know how, Mr. Blake. I found out last week. I'm about 6 weeks along." Cassian pulled the car over, put it in park, and turned to her with wonder in his eyes. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby," she confirmed. "Are you happy?" In answer, he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with such tenderness it brought tears to her eyes. "Ecstatic," he whispered against her lips. "Terrified, overwhelmed, but mostly just grateful." "Your father would be proud," Zaria said softly. "The Blake legacy continues." "A legacy beyond business," Cassian agreed. "A family. Our family." Back at the estate, they stood together on the terrace looking out at the lake that once held only painful memories. Now, in the moonlight, it was simply beautiful. "We should start thinking about names," Cassian said, his hand protectively covering Zaria's still flat stomach. "I was thinking us, if it's a girl, maybe Lillian, as a middle name." Zaria watched his face carefully. "To honor the past while embracing our future." Emotion filled Cassian's eyes. "And if it's a boy?" "Edward after your father? Or James after my dad?" "Edward James Blake." Cassian tested the name. "I like it." They stood in comfortable silence, contemplating the future stretching before them, a future neither could have imagined when Zaria had first walked through the doors of the Blake estate desperate and wary. "Thank you," Cassian said suddenly. "For what?" "For answering that ad. For taking a chance on a cold, broken man who offered you a position that came with a ring." He turned her to face him. "For seeing something in me worth saving." "I didn't save you, Cassian. You saved yourself." Zaria touched his face. "I just reminded you that you could." He covered her hand with his. "Either way, our arrangement turned out better than expected, wouldn't you say?" "Much better." Zaria smiled up at the man who had gone from employer to husband, from business partner to true love. Some might even call it a happily ever after. "I wouldn't go that far," Cassian teased, the lightness in his tone a testament to how far he'd come. "But a happy beginning, definitely." As they sealed this new promise with a kiss, Zaria knew her grandmother had been right after all. Love born in a lie had indeed bloomed into truth. And that truth had set them both free. To heal, to hope, and to build a future neither of them could have imagined when they first said, "I do." The position had come with a ring, but love had come with everything else. The end.